I'm in my 50s, and I can't tell you that most of my peers, when we get around, their number one roadblock to doing what we do in our training model, to barbell training, is their own mind. They think they're done. They think they're done with life. They think their best strength years are over, and it's my job to help to change that.
You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship.
Welcome to the Barbell Logic Podcast. I'm Scott Hambrick. Of course, Matt Reynolds is here, and today one of my favorite humans is here. He's the host of 40 Fit Radio Podcast, owner-operator of the beef operation, the 5M Ranch,
That's funny.
doctor of physical therapy, father of many, Ford owner.
Yeah.
He's a lot of things to me. He's doctor of physical therapy, Darin Deaton.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Welcome.
Great to be here. Great
Welcome
to be here.
You've been on the show before.
Yeah.
You're like Scott's. You live Scott's dream life, I think is what it is. I think the reason that we keep inviting you back.
I'm not that into Michelle.
That's so bad.
She's sweet and all.
She's got to listen to this episode.
So we're having you on primarily because of you're an excellent doctor of physical therapy, and you use barbells in your therapy, like in your facilities. You own, how many physical therapy facilities do you own?
We have, I'm a partner. I'm the founding partner of a group. We have 6 right now. We have 2 that we've pre-leased for 2020, and we think we just are about to sign another lease. So we should have, by the end of 2020, we should have 9.
Got it.
So
And
that's the goal. So I'm busy.
What did you have 51 this year? How old are you?
I am 52, almost turning 53.
Gosh, it was like it was yesterday. I remember you turning 50.
Are you 40 yet?
I am. I'm 40. I'm about to turn 41.
You just turned 40 this
No,
last
I've got 40. Yeah, 41's coming up though for me.
So how's it feel?
Old, creaky.
Yeah.
Everything
Stiff.
creaks. I get up in the morning. You know, we've got almost all hardwoods in the house, and the first thing I have to do is walk down a hardwood set of stairs, a
Yeah.
very tall set of stairs. Like our first floor has 10-foot ceilings, so the stairs are tall. So I'm not crazy about the way I look or feel going down the stairs at 5:15 in the morning when I roll out of bed.
Yeah. Motion is lotion, right? Lubrication.
That's right. So then I get to moving.
You need a Peloton up on the second floor so you can get all
Is that
lubed up before you
get
get
warmed
up.
up before you go down. You know, I think that's interesting. Now, the way I tell my patients and our clients in our gym this all the time is think about leather in the winter, how it feels in the winter. You get into a car that's got leather seats. It's hard. It's non-pliable. It's it's not very good. But what's it feel like in the summer? Man, it's pliable. It's elastic.
Hot. Burns my thighs.
Hot. Yeah, exactly. But that is the difference, though, between the older individual and how they feel early in the day, generally speaking, and the younger individual. Younger being the hot leather and older being the...
But listen, before we get into all this barbell stuff, I've been looking at windmills, Darin Deaton.
Oh, I love my windmill.
Do you know how
love
much a 10-foot air motor windmill is?
50 grand with everything in it, probably.
No, it's not that bad.
Maybe 30 grand with everything in it, probably.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Well,
Gotcha.
you got to drill the well, and if you're going to go, let's say 300, 400 foot,
We don't have
good
to.
aquifer.
We have water here in Oklahoma. We don't have to go that deep.
Yeah, well. But there's 20 grand right there. There's 20 grand for a windmill. Hey, I put lights on my windmill the other day. My windmill's about 35 feet.
Like it's
And so
Christmas
the other
decoration.
day, yeah. So I'm climbing up one side. I got to show you a picture of this, man. It's precarious. But I'm climbing up one side. I get all the lights lit. Are ready on one side. And guess what I realized I did?
You put the plug at the top.
Yeah.
I put the wrong end of the lights at the bottom
Yeah. Yep.
and the plug at the top.
Right.
What was I thinking? You know?
So did you change it all out, or did you just run a really long cord?
No, I just ran a really long cord and hit it behind the back. So, but
Darin has Darin's windmill. This is all this hot windmill talk for all the podcast people that came for strength training. He has a 3-legged windmill stand. It's
really unusual.
The tower is a tripod.
Okay.
There isn't another one. I have you ever seen
Never
another
seen
one?
it.
I haven't seen one in our county, at least, and I think I've seen one other on the highway one time in West Texas. But this company is a company out of Amarillo, Texas, actually. I think it's not Aero Motor, it's another company, American Windmill something, but that windmill was built in the 1950s. It's really cool.
Oh, wow.
That's a cool deal.
So it's
And,
it's not one that you had put on. It was
No.
on the property when you bought the property.
No, it was on the property, and it has a Sweetwater well that fills into a cistern, and it's strong. The windmill is strong. It's strong enough to hold my fat, you know what? So
Yeah. Obviously, since you climbed up on it and decorated it like a Christmas tree.
yes,
Yeah, I will need
I will. I will send a picture. I'll load a picture on Instagram for you, Scott.
Thank
So,
you.
You bet.
So often when we start a conversation with somebody who's asking us about strength training, the first thing they say is, "Oh man, I'd love to do that, but I can't squat, or I can't deadlift, or I can't train because of X. I got bad knees. I hurt my knees in football in high school. I've got a bad back. I've got whatever that thing is." And if it comes, if the message about why it is actually okay for them to train comes from me, it doesn't carry a lot of weight with it, because I am in fact not a doctor of physical therapy, nor is Scott, but you are. And so what do you do with your clients who come to you? You work with a lot of like post back operation clients, knee replacements, hip replacements, labrum or rotator cuff surgeries. Like, these are all people that you work with on a daily basis. How many of those people are training with barbells?
I'll say in a clinical setting, less than I would like. And some of that is exactly because of the reason that you're talking about, human perception.
Yep.
If they come to me in a gym setting as a gym client, I have a gym client right now. He's in his mid-60s. He just had a total hip replacement, posterior lateral approach 3 weeks ago, and he is doing rack pulls, and I call them sit-to-stands. He and I know they're box squats basically without weight right now. And so he is doing the barbell movements. He's pressing, he's bench pressing, he's doing chins. So he's doing the barbell movements 3 weeks post-op, and they have him in physical therapy, air quotes, too. And so I think the most difficult thing with that population, or with any adaptive or special population, is changing the narrative.
Yeah.
We have to change the narrative. And whether it comes from someone who's a world-class strength coach like you and Scott, with tons of experiential evidence and training and background and certifications, or whether it comes from someone like me who's a DPT, we have to begin to slowly change the narrative with our clients so that they recognize that the concepts, that the thing that they think is so true is really not so true. So the more we can build them into the more we can build them into the adaptation of using a barbell, or using the barbell movements to start with. A good example was, I had a guy that came in the clinic the other day, said he couldn't do 2 sets of 10 bodyweight squats. We call them sit-to-stands. Said his knees were killing him. His arthritis is really bad in his knees. I said, great, no problem. We won't do those that way anymore. You're going to do a set of 5, and then you're going to walk away and do another exercise, and you're going to come back and do a set of 5, and we're going to do that 6 times. He goes, oh, I think I can do that. So we just adapted.
Even the vocabulary that you have to use, like,
yeah,
you have to call them sit-to-stands and not squats. Because if you call them squats, everybody's going to freak out on you.
What's your one rep
Yeah,
back sits to stand?
But everybody understands that they should be able to stand up out of a chair, right? Like, that's a pretty common sort of, if you have to order one of those chairs that has a chair lift on it to lift your ass up out of the chair, that's bad news, right? We're going to a nursing home soon. And so you have to even change the vernacular of what you call the exercise in the clinic. So let me change the question a little bit. If you had total, complete control of all of the people who come to you in your gym and all of the people who come to you in your clinic, what percentage of those people would be training with barbells if you had the choice?
100%.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be very, very few cases, and most of those cases will be conditions where there's instability, where there's a lack of stability in structural tissue, or the risk is too great for the reward in that model of treatment or training. Okay. We've got to use some other method to start with. A good example would be a post-op labor repair that's a full thickness cartilage tear in the shoulder that's pinned down. I'm not going to move them a whole lot, and I'm definitely not going to move them under load for 4 to 6 weeks. I have to be very careful because I run the risk of ripping things off that don't need to be ripped off. So they might not be doing barbell movements, but as soon as I'm allowed to do movements based on the protocol and my relationship with the referral source or the physician, that movement is going to mimic a barbell movement, a compound, large, multi-joint movement.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. So even in this guy that you said you wouldn't do it with, 6 weeks later you would.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's based on when is the appropriate timeline to do it. So I think everyone and anyone at any age, any population, barring a very, very few individuals, should be using the barbell or a barbell type movement in their training. There's no reason why they can't be. The biggest limitation is their own mental narrative that they've created. Their biggest limitation is that barbells seem for people like you and I.
Yep. You mean jacked, incredibly boyishly good-looking men?
Yes, with great hair.
Yeah, boyish. This morning I was looking at the blogs I subscribe to, and I saw this morning. Survey reveals the surprisingly young age many give up on working out. It's on studyfinds.org. It's just a survey they did.
And what is the age?
41.
It's average. 41.
Yeah.
Like too old to, and that's working out. That's not even training, right? That's exercise.
Yeah, that's not heavy squats.
You know
that's
what? I'm done with going to the big box fitness gym and walking on the treadmill. I can't do that anymore.
Right.
That's what they've decided.
Well, I have patients that say, I walk, I'm walking. I say, great, that's normal human locomotion. That's not exercise. That's normal movement for a human. You should be walking.
Well, I chew, Darin. Darin, I chew.
Well, it's
I
great.
eat food.
Wow, look at your cheek muscles. They're so large, too. And I'm not looking at the bottom half, for your face there.
Right.
But, yeah, so, that's, to me, I always tell my patients, that's normal locomotion. That's not exercise. Now, if you did sprint intervals, now we're getting to where we're starting to talk about, a stressor that's large enough to cause an adaptation. But people, again, we talk about this idea. I'm writing an article right now on it, just called Changing the Narrative. We've got to start as coaches, and I have to start as a physical therapist, becoming better at getting people to change the narrative inside their mind so they can perceive that this is possible for them. And we all know as professionals in what we do that 99.9% of the population should be lifting weights. And the barbell is the safest, most effective method in doing that in the way that we teach it. We think it is.
So if you've got somebody that comes in and they're special, they got the hip thing, they got the shoulder thing, they've got the
knees.
They're 81 years old and bad osteoporosis. What do you start doing to modify from what's written in the book? What's different for that person on their first session? You've already said a little bit of it. It ain't a squat. It's a squat, but it's a sit to stand. They're unloaded for sure. Mm-hmm. So what else do you do, Darin?
I think my number one goal is to closely mimic as much as possible the big three compound movements, the squat, the press, and the deadlift. So for each individual, that may be, I may approach that differently based on that adaptation. For example, if they just don't have any shoulder mobility at all and they can't get the bar, let's say they're strong enough to squat a bar, but they can't get the bar down low into what we would call the squat position, the low bar position, then I might high bar squat them, but I'm still squatting them. And then I would give them accessory exercises and some mobility work, dynamic and mobility work under load, because that's been shown to be the most effective, not just stretches, to work shoulder mobility. And a lot of times the bar will get that for me over time. And their greatest limitation may be that not that they're not strong enough to squat heavier loads, they just can't get it into the right position. And so the form is limiting the progress, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But I don't wait for the form to become perfect. I read an article the other day on an evidence-based physical therapy group that I'm involved with, a group of other PTs. And basically the article was, don't wait for perfect form to load. I mean, how long have we been saying that as strength coaches?
Sure.
But the physical therapy community has been very, very given us a lot of pushback in that area. And now they're all starting to say, oh, maybe we can load before form gets perfect. So the first thing is mimic the big three as closely as possible. It might be a sit to stand. It might be we do a high bar instead of a low bar squat. On the press, I might have to modify some of the press, elbow positioning, which we want to try to, the press is a tough move to not have a good bar path on.
Sure.
You know?
Do you think the change in the narrative really starts with the change in the logic behind the narrative? And what I mean by that is that the conventional wisdom has been, if I have this thing that hurts, if I have bad knees, I shouldn't load my knees because that will cause an injury to my knees. And we've known for years that, in fact, what the narrative is like, now hold on. There are muscles that control your knees, that will extend your knees and flex your knees, make your knee go straight, make your knee go bent, right? And if we make those muscles stronger, they will actually support the joint of the knee, not the other way around. So when you can change the logic behind it, you say, now wait a minute, a weak knee or a weak back is a vulnerable knee or a vulnerable back to injury. But a strong knee, and when I say a strong knee, I literally mean the musculature that surrounds the knee, that controls the knee, or a strong back is one that is more resilient and less vulnerable to injury. And so I often think that the narrative has to start there with people. And for me, in my experience as a strength coach, obviously not as a PT, that story is the one that seems to work the best with people to start there to go, now let's just think about this logically for a second. And I also understand why the logic of conventional wisdom is, man, if I have bad knees, I better not do anything on my knees or I'm going to hurt my knees.
Right.
I get it, right? Like that actually makes some sense. Now we just understand after decades and decades and decades of doing correct human movement that you don't get more injured knees. You get less injured knees when you do that.
I explain to patients all the time, there are a lot of things that are intuitive that we have inside of that we have a certain thought line inside of us and we think that intuitively this is related to this. In other words, it's confirmation bias a lot of times, but there are a lot of things that are intuitive that are totally wrong. Sure. They're intuitively wrong. And the best example of that is when I get a balance patient into my practice, they think to make their balance better, we're going to do something magical. And what I tell them is, I'm going to make you off balance.
Right.
Because I've got to start to test your system that you have avoided using for so long because you felt unbalanced and you had fear avoidance. So you had this certain narrative in your mind that if I put myself at risk, I'm going to injure myself, I'm going to fall. And we know that as a PT, the greatest risk of falling, when we look at fall risk, is the fear of falling.
Right.
So what I have to do, and I talk about it this way, exposure without danger. That's what I do in my practice. That's what I do in my gym. I want to expose them to the thing they so very much don't want to do.
Just like push them into foam pits and stuff?
Yeah.
I was thinking about how I could apply this for charity.
I'd watch it now. So I want to expose them to what they don't want to do at a level, and then I'm going to convince them experientially over time that, wow, okay. I didn't fall. Or, wow, I'm getting stronger. My back feels better. Wow, I'm getting stronger. My knees feel better. Here's what's interesting about that one client I mentioned. We did the 30 reps of sit to stands, quote unquote squats. And at the end of the session, he said, man, my knees feel really good.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, wow, that's interesting. The very thing that he thought was causing his knee pain, he now has a change in the narrative inside of him that says, this actually is helping my knees. So I've got to gradually lead him down that path. Now, with a special population, that's a lot harder to do than it is with just a standard everyday strength client that's 25 years old and just wants to get strong.
Sure.
That's easy to do. But when you're talking about, there are so many people that are our age, and I use that term loosely because I'm like your grandfathers.
Right.
I'm like your grandfather to the
You two
young
are
children
clearly
here.
way older than me.
Yes,
I'm like
exactly.
the son, but okay.
Yes,
I'm kind of old too.
Biologically, I look much younger than y'all. I'm just saying, and my Instagram backflip will prove that. But I'm serious. But
I'm serious. Hey, listen. Reynolds was telling us about a new client that he has. Tell me about this client. You've met your match.
So I got a doctor. He's a general practitioner in Northwest Arkansas in Bentonville. So he's just a couple hours away. I actually met him up in Detroit at Sully's Barbell Prescription Seminar, and he ended up hiring me for online coaching. There's not any good coaches in Northwest Arkansas. He comes up here on occasion. But anyway, so I've just been coaching him for I think 6 or 7 weeks now, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
8,
cool.
maybe 8, but probably less than 8. So he's just on LP. He's 57 years old, almost 58, 220 pounds, 6 foot tall, on LP. You want to guess what his squat is?
No, what is it?
57 years old, right? 395 for 3 sets of 5, still on LP.
Strong.
Isn't that crazy?
Genetics.
Yeah, he's an outlier. He's an outlier on the other side of that spectrum, right?
Yeah.
So there's always this spectrum of sort of athleticism. Like that guy is just made to be he looks like a competitive masters CrossFit athlete. He kind of looks like you. He looks like, but he's nearly 10 years older than you. And,
no, he's 57.
7, yeah, and you're 50.
I'm 53
3,
almost.
okay, yeah.
Watch your math there.
But the guy's never trained. I mean, he's never trained. But you can tell he has done fitness stuff
right
for years, right? So he's exercised and done those sorts of things. So and so for him, and he's a great example because he's a general practitioner. So he deals with normal family doctors, everyday Joes all the time, right? And so they can look at him and say, man, you look great. It's like, yeah, I'm squatting and deadlifting and doing the thing. If we go back to the other side of that spectrum, which is I think the direction you were starting to go, is it's a much harder sell often for that people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, especially who are on the left end of that athletic spectrum, right? So they've either never done anything athletically or haven't in decades, or the thing that they did something and hurt themselves, and they've decided, well, if I squat and deadlift, I'm just going to hurt myself again because I hurt. Last time I went and played golf, I tweaked my back. Well, you hadn't played golf in 10 years, and you swung a golf club real hard, or whatever, And often people hurt their backs doing things like dropping their keys on the floor, not picking up deadlifts. Like it's actually far more rare. So what do you do with those people, and what's that conversation like for them?
Well, and I think that's probably the norm. I think, if you look at it from a bell curve standpoint, most people fit in the middle somewhere.
Sure.
They're moderately athletic. There's some things that they're good at, some things that they're not, but most people kind of fit in the middle. If we look at the left-hand side, we would say these people are very unathletic. And the right-hand side, we've got your phenoms, the genetic, freaks like your guy. And so I think the difference is certain special populations are truly special populations in my mind. Just because you tell me you're a special population just may mean you have a terrible narrative.
Sure.
Okay. But if you walk into my gym and you're on the left-hand side of the curve and you have significant knee valgus, you have a crazy long trunk,
which means your knees come in, right?
You're knock-kneed. Okay.
There we go.
You've got really tight shoulders. You've got a genetic kyphosis of the spine. In other words, you're flexed in your thoracic spine.
Your hunchback.
Am I mentioning? Is this like Hambrick? No, I'm just joking. And so, but he's not knock-kneed. But I mean, you've got some of these structural issues.
Oddities.
It may mean that you are kind of a special population. I mean, that you have some modifications that need to be made in training. It may not. The number one thing I don't do initially when I meet the client is start changing things.
Well, and I think it's important. You just said
model.
There may be some modifications that you need to make to the training. But what you didn't say is not to train.
Oh no, and that's never part of the equation.
That's
never part of the narrative.
Right, and we say this like let's just be clear. There are a few groups of people out there who should not train, right? And most of those that are that could be potentially listening, we're talking about immediate post-op is often like immediately post-op. We want to be careful, right? We had a guy, we answered an email the other day of a guy who had just had a vasectomy, and he's like, I'm 4 days in, I'm feeling great. Can I squat? And we're like, nope.
Yeah, exactly.
Bro, no, what? Just wait.
You want a hemorrhage in your scrotum? Sure.
Yeah, doctor says wait 3 weeks, right? Like you just had a C-section. You had a baby, like, nope, right? So you just literally had your abdominal wall cut across. So post-op, we want to be really careful in that on this show, we have written a narrative that's a little bit like we want to be skeptical about physical therapists doctors, chiropractors. But that's not the same thing as being skeptical about a surgeon who's just performed surgery who says, listen, arm needs to stay in the sling for this long. Or, you know, you've got a 7-inch scar running up your knee with stitches or staples. Right. We're not going to have that person squat. So like those are obvious ones, right?
Yeah, and I use logic, and I tell all the therapists that work in our practices, they'll say, you know, sometimes the less experienced therapists will say, well, when are you going to do this? When are you going to do that? They're looking for absolutes. I'm not going to give them absolutes. I tell them, what are the normal physiological healing timelines for the tissues involved? Yeah. How long does it take ligamentous tissue to heal? How long does it take tendons to heal? Muscular
ligamentous.
tissue.
I've never heard that word.
Soft tissue, ligamentous.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of ligaments, but I've never heard ligamentous. That's a fun word to say. Let's say it.
Yeah, ligamentous.
So good.
That's an actual word too. I didn't make that up. But
Sorry.
all these tissues, bone has a healing timeline too.
Sure.
So
Bone,
you want to be
tendons,
aware.
Ligaments, muscle, all have different timeline.
And that drives the intervention of the rehab training model. It's logical, it's reasonable, and it's methodical in how we do it. But here's a perfect example. I have a client that came in. He's a firefighter. He is 3 weeks post ACL rupture, tear.
Okay.
His ACL's gone. But when you do a clinical exam on him and you measure a Lockman's or an anterior drawer or a pivot shift, which are all special tests for instability of the knee is rock solid. So what did we do yesterday?
He has not had it fixed.
No, he hadn't had it fixed.
He basically he doesn't have an ACL.
Right, exactly.
And primarily the ACL sort of keeps your tibia from sliding forward. Is that fair enough for the layman's
forward
terms?
And rotating outward. Yes.
Okay, got it.
It controls that. So basically, what did I have him do yesterday? He's already done some basic rehab. Yesterday we started deadlifts. We started barbell squats. We started good mornings for hamstring development. And then we've got some other accessory exercises. But
by the way, the hamstrings kind of do the same thing as ACL, right? They also grab the tibia and keep the tibia from sliding forward.
That's right. So we use pain as the driver. Are you having much pain? No. Are you sore? Yeah, I'm a little sore, but he's not having pain. He's just sore. So I find that people that are going to have a problem with the narrative, and I hate to say it this way, but some people just look for a problem.
Yeah.
Sure.
Some people, they're a special population because they're
want
a
to be a
special
snowflake. Yeah,
absolutely.
they want to be.
It's in their head, and it doesn't mean they don't have a problem, but it means that their biggest limitation is not the physical problem.
Sure.
It's the narrative that's going on. And so with those clients, we're really trying to get them moving. But what you said is so true. We've also got to recognize that I had a client that came in yesterday. Post-op, AC joint, acromioclavicular joint, repair, shoulder. Full labral repair. He tore his entire labrum of the shoulder off. They reattached that. And he also had a bicep tenodesis, okay?
Which is what?
Where they take the long head of the biceps, they cut it because it's been torn off the labrum, and they reattach it down on the humerus lower.
Okay.
So now it's not a shoulder flexor anymore.
Right.
Now it doesn't assist with shoulder flexion.
All it's going to do is elbow.
Right. And then the other thing he had done was he had what's called a capsulorrhaphy, which basically means he had instability. He dislocated the shoulder 3 times in the military.
Okay. So the guy's shoulder was completely jacked up. So the general idea here is as bad as a shoulder can be jacked up, that's how bad this guy's shoulder had been jacked up.
33-year-old male.
Oh, wow.
Structurally, the shoulder has had a lot of surgery. We got to be real careful we don't pull things off from where they're attached.
Sure.
So we gradually progress him. And as soon as we're able to add compound movements, barbell type movements with him and the protocol will allow, we're ready to rock and roll. So it doesn't mean we won't. It just means when will we?
Sure.
That's the key.
So those are the immediate post-op people. And if we go back to this group of people, and it's sort of a categorical statement of people that often feel like they're a special population. They've got that kind of snowflake mentality. These are often people who have had an injury a long time ago. You were talking about the kind of normal injury, like the repair time for bone, tendons, ligaments, muscle. When somebody who comes to you that's 45 years old and are like, oh man, I hurt my back in football in 86 playing high school, you're like, bro, it's time to deadlift. Like it's not, you just, you just didn't have a laminectomy. That's not like, it's not, you're fine. Right. And so it's much more of a psychological hurdle to overcome than an actual physical. And again, it's not to say, Scott and I talked about this the other day as well. it's not to say that those people don't feel pain. Like I want to be careful. It's important for us to still be empathetic with the fact that I get it, man. Your back hurts. Your knees hurt, right? If you've got that, fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue, like you feel pain. But what is sitting around on the couch eating opiates going to do?
Right. And I think here's the key there. The preponderance of literature now tells us this. There is one modality, one treatment method in our world of training, one training method that gets 90, I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm going to say 90% plus of every condition better. There's only one modality that gets 90% of every condition better. It gets diabetes better. It gets hypertension better many times, or it improves it. It gets hypercholesterol better, or it improves it. It gets weakness better. It gets back pain better, shoulder pain. There's one thing, and that is barbell strength training or strength training, true strength training, muscle hypertrophy, and building the muscle to make it stronger, to improve all of the things that you and I know improve it. The problem is with the individual like that you're talking about is that they have built inside of their mind such a value system around the fact that this is the cause, this is the effect. This is the cause, this is the effect. We have to, what I have to do is, as a strength coach and as a PT, is gradually change that cycle of thinking over time, to change that narrative, change the way they think about it. And my experience has been the best way to do that is to start very small and to give them little bitty victories along the way. They may have pain. I mean, you guys know I've had 4 back surgeries.
Yep.
I have pain every single day in my low back. It doesn't mean my low back's injured. It means that I've got some wonky tissue in my low back. And I've probably also got some neuroscience things going on. I've probably also got some emotional ties to that pain too, even though I think I function with it. When I have pain in my low back that's different than what I have been experiencing recently, but similar to what I used to experience when I laid on the table having surgeries, it creates an emotional response.
Sure.
I get a little fear in me to think, oh, is my back bad again? So I have to use logic and reason when those kind of things happen. And that's what we try to do with our client base. And that's what we try to do with the special population. I don't consider most masters special population.
Sure.
Other than if they're a master's lifter, they're going to have certain connective tissue, certain training history or lack thereof, and certain issues that you don't deal with normally. We talk about the norm with the 20-year-old client or even the 30-year-old client. The 40-plus-year-old client is a different client.
So let's talk about some of those. So what are some of those things that you see that modifications you have to make for the master's lifter?
Well, I think the variables that we're looking at that are different for a master's lifter, and you guys are experts in this area too, especially from the programming and training standpoint. The adaptation rate's different. We have to recognize that in programming. We use the linear progression right up front.
Yep.
But if I had a 55-year-old individual come into me for training, I might not do 3 days a week to start with. Yep. Especially if I think that they're a what I call they have a failure to thrive. They're a slow adapter. If it's a male and he looks very female, in other words, he doesn't have a lot of masculine traits and he might be a slow adapter, then that might be over programming for him.
Sure. So what you're saying again to the laymen that are listening is just that it takes them longer to recover.
Yeah.
Very simple, right? Like older people, for some of them, not all of them.
Correct.
It takes them longer to recover. And for us, we're sort of, I wish this weren't the case, but we basically just beta test everybody on it, right? So what you're doing is you're starting them at either 2 days a week or 3 days a week. And what you might find is that if you start them 3 days a week, they might not be able to recover fast enough. And if you start them at 2 days a week, sometimes you find that they actually could probably do 3 days a week and they're not making progress as quickly as they could. And so we don't know until we get you under the bar and start programming you what that interval time length is, right?
Right. But I think that's one modification that you think about right up front. Number one, that your programming model might mean you have a slower adaptation rate for the average individual. Not everybody. We have the right side outliers that are genetic phenoms and left side. So, but that's one thing. The second thing is connective tissue pliability. In other words, they're just not as elastic as the younger client. They probably got some junk. And here's the funny thing. Just because they have a lot of training history doesn't mean they're going to be a better lifter either. They may have a ton of scar tissue from training and damaging that tissue over and over again. And I think that's definitely true with some of the CrossFit population.
Yeah, you called me one day, and we were talking about this, and I think you called it Darin Deaton's brittle tissue syndrome. What was it? What did you call it?
I don't remember now. That's another thing with being older. I can't remember.
I think you called it brittle tissue syndrome, where these people have had repeated micro traumas or even some macro traumas. Yeah. And then by and by, they're just more and more scar tissue in there. They're just not as resilient, and you have problems with those people. I've got a bunch of those dudes.
Well, and here's a great example. And all you two guys have experienced this in training. You remember when you pulled deadlifts, maybe with the wrong form, and you woke up the next day and your low back is just crazy sore. Sure. You and I know that your low back should really not be sore in a deadlift. It should be your hamstrings and maybe your glutes, but your low back should generally not be sore because it should be held in an isometric contraction.
Sure. It might be fatigued, but it shouldn't really hurt.
It might feel tired, okay?
Right.
But if you feel centralized, deep soreness, it's either muscular or potentially tendinous and ligamentous, okay? Well, how many of those workouts do you have to do before your body gets stress, repairs, heals, and repairs? Stress, heals, and repairs. Stress, heals, and repairs. And eventually that tissue that was very elastic when you were younger or you had less training underneath you now becomes more and more filled in with other types of collagen or other types of cells that aren't as elastic. They're more like plastic. Plastic breaks, rubber stretches and bends, okay? Sure. Plastic generally will only bend so far and then it breaks. Well, that's that plastic deformation versus elastic, okay? And so what happens is over time, that tissue starts to convert. Age alone converts that tissue. Age alone takes that tissue from an elastic form, collagen-wise, to a more plastic form. So that's why we have to be careful with that population. Doesn't mean we do not train them. It just means we consider that, and not only how we train them, but also how mobile they're going to be to get in the right position for barbell training.
Sure. So things like reduced
pliability.
range. So like some of the practical things you might do there is in the beginning some reduced range of motion, or that also might be we talk about the middle-aged and older male who has a really hard time getting a bar on their back in a proper squat position. So maybe we have to adjust where the bar goes on their back. Maybe we have to put a safety squat bar on their back. So those are the kind of changes that you would make. I'm assuming, right? Is that I don't want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what it would look like. It's not. It's not necessarily, hey, I've got bad knees, so we're going to let you squat 13 inches above parallel.
Right.
Right. Like, so where do we, and how do we know? Like, how do we know what's right? Like, where do we draw the line?
It's actual versus perceived. So right. I just assume they can do everything until they prove otherwise in the gym.
Right.
So I assume that they can do everything that I need them to do, and we go through the teaching model, and we go through getting them started. We here at our gym, we call it the barbell startup. And so we go through the teaching model, and I let their body tell me what they're not going to be able to do.
Sure.
I don't let their mind tell me that. Now, if they tell me I can't do that, I'll say, well, let's try. Well, I can't do that. Well, let's try. All right, well, then let's do this. And I gradually just work them to the edge of the water, and then I let them jump into the pond. I just gradually let them work towards it. But 9 times out of 10, what they think they can't do, they can. They just need to be convinced of it. And so, I would, bar placement would be one thing. Reducing range of motion would be another thing. Changing the programming model to allow for a little bit slower adaptation rate. I might put more dynamic and loaded stretching into their program because of the fact that I know they've got some mobility problems. I'm also going to be making sure that their nutrition is spot on, and that they recognize that 9 out of 10 Americans who try to strength train undereat in the area of protein. They just don't get enough protein. They get enough of all the other junk. They have plenty of calories in their diet, generally speaking, but they don't get enough protein. And so we talk about that. And I make sure that they understand that, no, you think you should eat less. I'll give you a good example. My father-in-law is approaching a much older age, and he eats 1.5 times a day. He's like, well, I don't have as fast a metabolism. I said, wrong. You need more protein than the younger guy, especially if you're training. And it's just hard for them. It's again, that's one of
because
those
their
things
muscle protein synthesis is so much less efficient.
That's right.
So
that's right.
So everybody thinks the 17-year-old kid is the one that needs all the protein to build the muscle mass. Now the kid's going to build the muscle mass with Pop-Tarts. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Right. But as we get
ramen
older,
noodles.
that's right. But as we get older, because our protein synthesis is less, the hormonal changes we go through, we actually need a higher percentage of our total daily calories need to come from protein than for that 18-year-old kid.
That's right. Yeah, the conversion rate's just less. And so those are things, again, we talked about, those are things that intuitively you would think, oh, I'm getting older, I should eat less or have fewer calories. No, not necessarily. That's not true. So again, it's convincing people. That is the hardest thing to do with this population. It's crazy hard. The other thing I think you find with this population is you are mentally training them as much as you are physically, because they think to themselves, man, I remember back when. If I get a patient or a client that comes in my gym and their entire narrative is histrionic, meaning they're living in the past.
That's Scott with humanity.
That's true. That's true. I'm going to set up like a new Amish kind of cult, and it's always 1985.
1985. That's way too no way, dude. I don't even know if you'd be happy in 1955.
No. We need 1985.
You're okay with 85?
Yeah,
really?
85's fine. 85's
Okay.
fine.
Reagan was president.
1885 or 1985?
1985.
Okay, all right. But I bet you'd be okay with 1885 too.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, okay. Just making sure. Yeah. It's the Uncle Rico. I used to be able to throw this football over them thar mountains. Right? You're like, all right, bro.
It's not happening. No, you could never throw the ball that far. Yeah, no, it was never that long either.
Right.
No, it was. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things you struggle with. And guys, we're all a little bit older. I'm in my 50s, and I can't tell you that most of my peers, when we get around, their number one roadblock to doing what we do in our training model, to barbell training, is their own mind. They think they're done. They think they're done with life. They think their best strength years are over, and that's totally, it's not true. And it's my job to help to change that. I mean, that's what I try to do at 45th. It's what I do in my gym and practice. Try to change that perception that a female over 50 can lift, that a female over 40 can lift, that a male that you should be lifting. You should be getting stronger. The other thing I think that you deal with this population is you've got to ask them, what are you doing this for? Even more so than you would the younger client. Because for guys that are really competitive, like your doctor, he's going to get into this, and it's addictive, man.
Sure.
Let's face it. It is addictive, and you can get out of balance. Now, not that they can't compete, and not that there's not value in that. I get that. But there does come a point sometimes where the competition is superseding health.
That's right.
And for the older client, I really focus in on health. Yep. Get strong. And if you want to compete, fine. But remember, if you get crazy into that, you could be declining
sacrificing some health. That's right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
But that's also rarely the conversation, right? So we do have those conversations occasionally. Like most of the time, the conversation is, if you ask most people who come in off the street, whether that's to your gym or to your clinic, they would tell you they just want to be healthy.
Yeah.
Right? They want a high quality of life, and a major part of that is health. And you get to say, yeah, hey, I've got an answer for that. Like I can fix that. I can. And and then you try to find the sweet spot where they feel a little better every single day. We've had I haven't talked about her on this episode yet, but we've talked about her lots of time. One of my favorite clients, Miss Sybil, is 80, just turned 84 last week, 84. And she came. I started training her at 79, just as she was getting ready to turn 80. So I've trained her for 4 years now, and 5 years now, and just about. And she does the barbell movements, and she's had a double hip replacement, and she's had a knee replacement, and she's had a bunch of the discs in her back have been whatever it's called
Fused.
Thank you. Fused. She's had about an inch taken off of one of her Achilles tendons in a weird surgery years and years ago. And all that stuff happened before I met her. And she's just a broken down old lady, and that's what she was.
She is the epitome of the special population.
That's right. She is. That's right. So
in multiple categories.
As you're thinking about like, can I do X? Can I train? Sybil came to me and we did exactly what you did. I taught her how to how to sit in her dining room chair and stand back up out of her dining room chair. That's how we started, right? And then we started doing. I've told this story in the podcast before, but we stacked. She's plays one of those big pipe organs at the Methodist church, and so she had a bunch of Methodist hymnals at her house, and so I stacked hymnals up and put a kettlebell on it, so it was a pretty short range of motion. Had her picking up like a 15-pound kettlebell with a pretty short range of motion, and then every day I'd come and train her, I'd pull one of the hymnals, and so that kettlebell would get lower and lower. And then I had her start deadlifting a barbell, but I did it out of a rack pull. And then we got her to the point where she could do a 53-pound rack pull, which is like a women's bar with a 10-pound plate. And then I put the plates, I put them on the ground, and she started deadlifting. And so now today, here we are, 4.5 years later, she deadlifts over 150 pounds for reps. That's her deadlift is her primary driver of strength. She has no problem bench pressing at all. She presses with some help. She doesn't have great shoulder mobility. She's very kyphotic as well. And she can't squat with a bar on her back, but she squats. She does box squats, and she actually holds a 50-pound medicine ball, which is a pretty heavy medicine ball for a lady that's 84 years old. And so she does just fine. So you talk about, so she still trains. She comes in and trains 2 to 3 days a week. She still does squats. She does a deadlift exactly like everybody else does, right? Deadlift on the ground, 150 pounds for reps. She bench presses like everybody else does. She has a little help on her press with range of motion. A lot of times we're just trying to like work that mobility in her shoulder with her press. And she does just fine. She does lat pull downs, and then I beat her to death on the Rogue Echo bike, and we talk about she's staving off death with some of the cardio stuff we do, like hit stuff with her, and she's 84, and so it's awesome. I just want to tell that story because it's just you guys know about. Well, we've interviewed her on the podcast before, but I think it's an important one in this episode to know, like, hey, that's probably not you. You're probably thinking to yourself, I got this bad back, or I got these bad knees, or my hip hurts, or I've got whatever, but you're probably not as bad as Sybil was at 79. No. And her quality of life has gone up tremendously.
A lot of people have their own self-imposed limitations. Yep. And they have to change the way they think about it. It doesn't mean they don't have problems. Yep. We always say in the physical therapy world, the patient that is not actually injured or hurt or have a problem, who's crazy, is very easy to get better. Because we just work them so hard that they don't want to do it anymore. The person who is got a lot of problems, but is normal mentally, is pretty easy to get better too, because they can handle it intellectually and logically and emotionally, and we work through it. But the person that's really hard to get better is the person who actually has problems, but they're a little mentally unstable too. That's the person that's really hard to get better. The other thing is this.
There are only two things. What about the one that doesn't have problems and has convinced themselves that they do have problems? They're the hardest.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're never going to fix their problem because they don't have a problem.
That's the crazy person who doesn't have a problem. And so, I tell people all the time, there are two things that put you in a nursing home. One, your mind gets weak. Two, your body gets weak. One or the other generally. Sometimes it's a combination thereof. It's both. And so my number one goal as a strength coach and as a PT is to ensure that, number one, your body's not going to get weak. And I know without a shadow of a doubt, the research supports this broadly, that if we strength train you and you get stronger, it helps your mind. Yep. It helps your cognitive, emotional functions. So why not strength train? See, this just makes sense. But we have to begin to change the way people think about getting older. And, Sully's done that with Barbell Prescription, Andy Baker's book, we've all trained clients like this. We know something that we have one of the most powerful tools out there, but we do have to consider this population a little differently. And here's the key. Here's the takeaway. Anyone and everyone should be training and lifting barbells or some movement similar to it. Like you said, Sybil didn't start with a barbell, but she was still training. There was a progression. It was logical. It was linear. And sometimes as a coach, we just have to be really creative in how to figure that out. That's hard sometimes. It's really hard. When you want to, all you want to do is train the client that's 35 years old and and he or she just gets under the bar and, all right, there's a 1 hour session teaching them all 4 lifts and they got their starting loads. Let's rock and roll. Very few people do that.
It's not very fun.
No. It's not creative either.
I have a dear friend who is 64 years old, and I would like for him to do this, and he does not. And he said to me one day, he said, I don't want to do that and get all fucking red-faced like you do. And so if you think you're one of these special populations and the whole thing just looks too crazy, you don't have to do it like me and Reynolds do it.
Yeah, that's an excuse. It's plain and simple an excuse.
Yeah, you don't have to go and try to work up to a 5-rep max 3 or 4 times a year and set a new PR every single year of your life. But like you said earlier, Darin, you said a 135 squat is not acceptable for a normal male. It needs to be heavier than that. They don't have to go to 405. We just talked about Reynolds Freak. You don't have to do that. Right. But what if you could squat 225 with the flu? Your life is going to be better. And that loaded motion is going to make your knees feel better. It's going to make your back stronger. Those presses, that 125 press you're going to work up to, it's going to make your shoulders feel better over time. So you don't look at competitive people.
Right.
Don't look at people that are pushing their limits. Right. Don't look at Instagram.
Don't look at Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Those are generally speaking, what you see on there is, let's face it. If you go to my Instagram and you see me doing a backflip at over 50, I'm not the norm. I recognize that. But I do represent several of those special populations. The difference is, and it's the same with a lot of guys or ladies that we train, we're not accepting the fact that those things are going to limit us until we figure out logically and experientially that those things limit us.
Sure.
The limit is not going to be in my mind. It's going to be in my body. If I push my body to that area and I realize I just can't do that. I just literally can't do that. Now, I might be able to figure out a plan to do that. Then I have to ask myself, of what value is it to me? Of what value is it? Mm-hmm. We know that just getting people reasonably strong is significantly valuable to them. And it matters. It matters.
Yep. So don't get in a measuring contest, guys. You see somebody on Facebook, or you see Reynolds and I, or you see even Darin. Darin, you did a layoff. I saw yesterday on Instagram. After your layoff, you came back and squatted 315 for 3x5.
Yeah.
That's a moonshot for a lot of people. Don't look at that.
Yeah. And I think we just gotta, we gotta be practical about the way we think about this population or any population. But I think the key is the other thing, Matt, we were talking about, and just get to this real quick, is this: hire a coach. If you're going to lift barbells, hire a coach. If you care about your body that much, and I don't care if it's, who it is, make sure they understand the basic principles of barbell training. Hire a coach. Hire someone that believes in strength training and has a program and can actually show you how to do this. You will save hundreds of dollars to the doctor and to other problems. You will save time. You will save money, and it's the best return on investment you can have for strength training. Hire a coach. Use Barbell Logic. If you don't have a coach in your area, use Barbell Logic online coaching. But hire a coach.
I want to leave just a few practical recommendations. 1, the weight doesn't have to be very heavy. In fact, there doesn't even necessarily have to be weight the first session. 2, you may not have to do, or may not even be able to do, a full range of motion. You may have to squat to a very high box, for example. Or like Reynolds said about Miss Sybil, you may have to pull a deadlift off of blocks or out of the rack, so it's not from the floor. Or a hymnal, right? Your hymnal blocks. So don't worry about the weight on the bar. Don't even worry about the range of motion. The important thing is that you're a man or a woman of action and that you do the darn thing right now, and you're going to do it 3 times a week, and you are going to get better. And the state of Texas has taken their foot off of Darin's neck, Matt. And if you're if you're in the greater Dallas area, you could go to Riata and go see Darin and one of his people that he's trained and adhere to his methodologies.
RIATA, right?
Right. Riata Therapy Specialist is the practice, riatatherapy.com. And I have patients that we treat first because they just want to be in that environment. I have a guy I'm seeing today at 1:30. He saw one of my therapists. He found out about us, found out about me, and today he's seeing me for a barbell startup session.
Nice.
His nephew is bringing him. He's in his 70s. He could not stand up on his own when we started with him. And today he's doing barbell training.
Excellent. And he's going to be training at Fort Worth Strength and Conditioning with you and or producer Trent. You can meet both of those guys down there.
I don't even know that people have made the connection, but producer Trent is sort of your head coach there at the gym. And so produces our show and produces your show, 40 Fit Radio, and is your primary barbell coach at Fort Worth Strength and Conditioning, along with you.
Great guy. Great human. Great human, great coach, a great producer.
Yeah.
Hell of a producer.
Producer Trent also produces Dr. Pewter's podcast.
Yeah.
He fired me at Online Great Books. He doesn't do that one anymore.
Well, that's a huge surprise.
He fired me.
I was going to say, when you were talking about your buddy that doesn't want to do it because he doesn't want to get all red-faced like you, I was like, that ain't the training. That's the stress about, that's the anger about humanity in general, the state of culture.
This dude's angrier than me, man.
Trent's like, I'm going to keep all the happy podcasts, and I'm going to get rid of all the ones that rob me of value. He's like, Online Great Books has to go.
Right. The friend of mine that doesn't want to get all red-faced, I'm always the voice of reason with that guy.
Oh, really?
I'm like, wait, this is too much.
Maybe that guy needs a podcast.
Yeah.
You know, I think Scott, all those recommendations are perfect, and you know, just get over your own hurdle. Many of your own limitations, or all of us, a lot of our own limitations are in our own minds. We just got to see past that and take the first step forward. Like you said, be a person of action. Develop a little self-mastery. Be actionable, and then go out and find someone that you can communicate with and that you can work with, develop credibility with. I honestly believe that if we're talking about this masters population, let's use the number 40.
Sure.
In most professional sports, anything over 30 to 35 is masters.
Sure.
You know, but let's use 40. If you're over 40 years old and you're not training with weights and doing strength training, you're missing the mark.
Well, your quality of life is declining. It has to be.
Yes. This is something that, and it's just normal daily hygiene. People ask me all the time how I do this with my schedule, and my schedule is crazy busy. And I tell them, how do I put deodorant on? How do I brush my teeth? How do I shave? Yep. It's just part of normal daily hygiene. And once you adapt that and you start getting into that 2 or 3 days a week, that's all it takes. I deadlift once a week, and my deadlift's still climbing.
Yep.
I deadlift once a week.
So, who's your partner going to be in this couples meet, this partner meet, team meet, whatever?
I'm not doing the meet because I need to coordinate it and run it.
That's always tough. That's the worst thing about having a coordinated
My wife
meet.
and I were going to do it, and my wife is not a competitor. She was Michelle. Yeah, Scott, you know Michelle. So do you, man. She is not excited about doing it. She was like, And then I started realizing everything that needed to happen with it. And I want all you guys to have a great experience. So I just decided I wouldn't lift. Plus, I don't want to take home the top award.
Right.
I mean, sheesh.
Maybe I should
I'm just joking.
Maybe I need to pay to send Jordan and Aaron Stanton down.
Oh, crap.
Just to crush us. Just to beat the hell out of everybody.
They'll crush us nationally anyway. So.
That's true. Hey, if you, and this is not a sales pitch, but if you just don't know how to start, you can email experience@barbell-logic.com. And we'll help you get started. And let me be clear, like, we would love for you to be a client at Barbell Logic Online Coaching, but here's the great thing. If you'll email us, we'll walk you through your first session, and we'll find you a coach in your town if there's a coach in your town, because we would rather you be coached by them than coached by us. And if there isn't one in your town, then we'll give you an opportunity to be coached by us. But if you just want, you're just like, I don't know even where to go to get started today, the easiest thing to do is just email experience@barbell-logic.com. We'll help you get started. There's no credit card. There's no catch. There's no strings. We have people there. We want to give people a great experience with us, whether they spend money with us or not. It's okay. It's completely free. We'll walk you through your first session. We'll teach you how to video yourself on your phone. Coach will walk you through your form, do a call with you, and then try to find a coach in your town to coach you. And if there isn't one, then we'll give you an opportunity to do that online. So there's no excuse not to do that because there's no commitment. There's no money.
Yeah, we really do want people to do it. I mean, you are like a consummate salesman, Matt Reynolds.
Yeah.
But we really do want people to do it. And I really would. I mean, I've got a full roster of online coaching clients, and I enjoy it very much. But any of those people that are my clients, if they had a coach in their town that they could go see, I think they should leave me and go do that. I mean, it's best. And so I just want people to do this stuff. I had an online Great Books guy email me this morning. He said, man, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to quit. I started a group in my home. That's
awesome.
great. That's what I want you to do.
Yeah,
Leadership,
we do
man.
the same thing. Like when somebody leaves online coaching, like because I hired so-and-so and we know that person is a good coach, we're like, that's always a win.
Right.
If somebody decides to stop doing online coaching to hire a good in-person coach, that's a win, right? The online coaching is here because it gives everybody the opportunity to get coaching no matter where they live. That's why it's
I have a lifelong principle that I use, and I've used it for the last 30 years in clinical practice.
Wait a minute. Let me get a pencil. Hang on.
And I've been in business ownership for 30 years as a PT. This year, 30 years. I graduated PT school 30 years ago this month, with my bachelor's at least. I let the nickels and the noses take care of themselves. My number one job is not to be a businessman. My number one job is to heal people, is to help people get better. And if I do really good at that and then I excel at that, I'm blessed to earn a wage out of that. I'm blessed to make a living off of that. And that's why I approach every single aspect of business, or try to. And guess what? When I haven't, it's failed normally. It's never lasted long term. That's what's going on here with Barbell Logic. That's what's going on with what we do locally. And that is this, basically. If we make you strong and it improves your quality of life, that is our number one goal. And if we do that well, and you tell others about it, and you improve your quality of life, guess what? We'll make a living.
Yep.
We don't have to worry about the details. We really don't. I mean, you have to structure a company and you have to do all those things. But there are not too many organizations that are in the health and fitness field that you can say that about, especially if you go to the fitness field out online. And if you go to a lot of other areas, there's a lot of gimmicks out there. There's a lot of fads and gimmicks. And I know I can speak for Barbell Logic. I hope I can, guys. Sure. I can speak for 40 Fit Radio. When you hear stuff on our programs, it is as much as possible science-based, logical, has good reason, and is evidence-based. We try to present what we can present so that you can hit the mark when you start your program and do real well. And so it's not about selling a program. It's just not.
2020 is the year of action for all you people. Stop making plans, stop decaying, and do all of those things that you need to do. One of those things is train. Another one is, that career change you were thinking about, or do I have enough money to have kids? Yes. Whatever it is, 2020 is the year of action. And if you're down in Fort Worth, go see Trent and Darin. I send my clients when they're in the Fort Worth area to go see Trent all the time. I'd let him train my mom, go see him. Go to Riata and let those guys help you with your shoulder, knee, hip, back, whatever rehab. And send your questions to us at questions@barbell-logic.com, and we'll answer those on a future show. And I will see you Saturday morning, I guess, Darin.
Yeah, or maybe Friday night. Let's hook up Friday night.
I'm thinking about eating at, Angelo's, the barbecue joint there in Fort Worth, Friday night.
No. We're going to Roscoe's.
What's that?
Roscoe's. That's where Charity's been. There's a barbecue place. Roscoe's.
Okay. Is it better than
Roscoe's
Angelo's?
was chicken and waffles.
Roscoe's is really good, man. Ask Charity. We took her there. Ask Charity. She likes Roscoe's.
I went into this Angelo's place, Matt. And on the menu, it said smoked salami sandwich.
Okay.
And I thought, what is that? Well, I'll get that because I don't even know I don't really know what that would be because I've never had I've never had a smoked salami at a barbecue place. So it came to me, it's white bread, like Texas toast kind of white bread, lots of mayonnaise on it, like a good purple onion on there, and a slice. It was bologna.
Right.
Huh.
But they make their own bologna there, so it's a little darker
Smoked.
and a little spicier than the bologna that you would, Bar S or whatever crap you would get. Dude, it was just a bologna sandwich. It changed my life. I went
amazing.
in one person, I ate that sandwich, and I came out a different person.
Wow.
Wow, had an experience there.
Yes.
intense.
So Roscoe's has got it to do, man.
All right.
Roscoe's is going to have to step up their game. We're going to need a field report.
I'll try it, but
And they also have the coldest beer in town. is crazy cold.
Like it's below 32. Like they do something to like keep the thing.
When it comes out, the mug, it'll start freezing the mug. It's awesome. Yeah, it's awesome.
All right, we'll do that Friday. Thank you guys so much for listening, and thank you for coming and doing another show with us, Uncle Darin.
Yeah.
You bet.
Thanks for being on the show,
guys.
man.
All
Talk to
right.
you guys soon.
Mother Hubbard.